Today's Introduction to Excel module, which is the last of the introduction modules before we actually start to build some visualizations and some management system tools. We're going to cover a couple of the last functions that we're going to need throughout the semester. The first one that we're going to be taking a look at is called the RAND function, which is a random number generator. And then we're going to look at one called norm inverse, which will allow us to generate random numbers based on some parameters for a normal distribution. And then lastly, in this module, we'll be covering how to create a named list and use that named list for a drop-down for data validation in Excel. But let's start out with the first section, which is generating a random number in Excel. One of the things that we can do is select on a cell, go to the formula bar, enter in a equal sign, and in here we can enter RAND, R-A-N-D, left parentheses and right parentheses. And you can see what happens here is it will generate a random number for you. A number basically between 0 and 1. It's a uniform distribution here, so it pretty much will generate a number between 0 and 1. You see that every time I hit the F9 key in the top of your keyboard, it will generate a new number. So you can see it's just generating a number with a equal probability between 0 and 1. Now what's nice about this particular function is what we can do is if we wanted to multiply, let's say, by 1,000, we're able to now generate a number between 0 and 1,000 because basically we're multiplying a value between 0 and 1 times 1,000, and we're ending up getting these particular values as we hit the F9 key. Now another thing that you can do here is we can couple this with a function called int, where we're able to turn the value into a integer. And as we walk through the numbers, you can see now that we're getting a whole value, or an integer, between 0 and 1,000. And then we can change this if we wanted to generate a number between 0 and 100. The same way we're able to generate those values. So this is helpful when we're generating some fake data from a uniform distribution to just use the RAND function. Now, oftentimes when we're doing some of our exercises, we'll want to actually replicate a normal distribution and numbers that would be coming from a normal distribution. And we can do this by using a function called norm.inv, which basically is the inverse, normal inverse on the normal distribution. What we can do in here is you can see it asks for 3 parameters, a probability parameter, a mean, and a standard deviation. If we enter in to the probability the RAND function, which is basically going to be a uniform distribution that we are throwing in here, and then we put in, for example, a mean of 5 and a standard deviation of 0.05, what will happen is it will generate, this function will generate a value centered on 5 with a standard deviation of 0.05, and it will provide a random value that would match a normal distribution for those particular parameters. So you can see as we're running these by hitting the F9 key, we are getting values that are pretty closely centered around 5, and because we had a little bit lower standard deviation are pretty close to that number. You can see if we decide to take this to 0.25 and generate, you can see that now the spread is looking a little bit different. We use this function. We will be using this function to simulate a normal distribution for some of our simulations later in the class, but this gives you an introduction to using that particular function. So as far as functions are concerned, those are the 2 that we would be using. Those are the last 2 that we'll be using in the class for our exercises, the RAND function and the norm inverse function. Now the last thing we wanted to cover in this module before we move on to actually creating some data visualizations and management system tools is generating a drop-down list. And in this particular case, let's say that we simply wanted to have the months of the year. One of the nice features in Excel is it's pretty intelligent on some of these drop downs. So if you start to type, January, February, and just drag it down, it's able to fill in that list for you. Now, if we wanted to actually reference this list and use it elsewhere within Excel, what we can do is select the range. So in this case, B3 to B14. And up here in the left-hand corner, you'll see there's something called the name box. It's right next to your formula bar. And if we click on here and we type in months as the name for this particular list and hit enter, what we'll be able to do is we'll be able to reference this name in other places within Excel. And you'll see that what happens is when I select the same range, it's going to show me that this is actually the name for that range is months. You can also use the drop down to view all of the different named ranges that you have created within Excel, and if you select it, it'll take you right back to the one that you created. So where this becomes useful for us is we're going to use some data validation in some of our activities. So if you go up to the top here and click on the Data tab, and over on the side here you'll see there's something called Data Validation. If we select on Data Validation and select a setting that allows a list and only a list, and we simply type in equal months and hit enter, you can see that what it has done is it has dropped, and let me actually set this background to white. What you'll see is it has actually put a drop down on this particular cell that we've put in place here. So with this particular cell, if we select the drop down, you can see that now it only allows us to select those values that we've put here into this months category. So I can come back here, and if I tried to type maybe I had a typo and I tried to put it in there, it's going to tell me that that's not a valid response, which is really nice for controlling the user inputs on some of the forms that we'll be creating later on in the semester. What is also nice about this is if we decided that we wanted to change this and instead of having the full months just have the abbreviations, we can quickly see that it has automatically updated this, because all we're doing is referencing the basically a pointer back to this named list, and it is automatically changed for us, and we can see that on our drop downs. So this is going to be important for us later on in the semester. So in this particular module, this is the last introductory module before we start to create some actual real activities in Excel. We learned how to use the RAND function to generate a random number. We learned how to use the norm.inv function for the normal inverse to basically simulate a normal distribution. And now we've also learned how to create a named range and to create a drop-down list.